Welcome to today's episode of Mysteries of Human Evolution, where we journey back through the mists of time to uncover one of humanity's most pivotal moments. Picture this. You're standing on the African savanna 1.8 million years ago. The sun is setting, painting the grasslands in hues of amber and gold. In the distance, you spot a small group of our ancient relatives, not quite human, but no longer ape. They're taller than their predecessors, with longer legs and larger brains. These are Homo erectus, and they're about to change everything. But here's what will shock you. They're about to discover something that will transform not just their own destiny, but the entire trajectory of life on Earth. Something so revolutionary that it will separate us forever from every other species on this planet. Something that will allow these early humans to cook their food, extend their days beyond sunset, survive in frozen landscapes, and ultimately develop the complex brains that would one day build civilizations. What was this earth-shattering discovery? Fire. Now, you might think you know this story. You might imagine a single moment, perhaps lightning striking a tree, and one clever early human thinking, "I should grab that flame." But the truth is far more complex, far more fascinating, and far more human than that simple tale. How did creatures with brains only 2/3 the size of ours master one of nature's most dangerous forces? How did they learn to capture, control, and create something that had terrified every other animal since the dawn of time? Today, we're going to uncover the incredible story of how Homo erectus discovered fire. Welcome to today's episode of Mysteries of Human Evolution, where we journey back through the mists of time to uncover one of humanity's most pivotal moments. Picture this. You're standing on the African savanna 1.8 million years ago. The sun is setting, painting the grasslands in hues of amber and gold. In the distance, you spot a small group of our ancient relatives, not quite human, but no longer ape. They're taller than their predecessors, with longer legs and larger brains. These are Homo erectus, and they're about to change everything. But here's what will shock you. They're about to discover something that will transform not just their own destiny, but the entire trajectory of life on Earth. Something so revolutionary that it will separate us forever from every other species on this planet. Something that will allow these early humans to cook their food, extend their days beyond sunset, survive in frozen landscapes, and ultimately develop the complex brains that would one day build civilizations. What was this earth-shattering discovery? Fire. Now, you might think you know this story. You might imagine a single moment, perhaps lightning striking a tree, and one clever early human thinking, "I should grab that flame." But the truth is far more complex, far more fascinating, and far more human than that simple tale. How did creatures with brains only 2/3 the size of ours master one of nature's most dangerous forces? How did they learn to capture, control, and create something that had terrified every other animal since the dawn of time? Today, we're going to uncover the incredible story of how Homo erectus discovered fire. Chapter 2. The Foragers of Light. The acrid smell of smoke still hangs in the air 3 days after the lightning strike. What once was a lush patch of woodland near a seasonal river is now a blackened wasteland of smoldering stumps and ash-covered ground. Most animals have fled to safer territories, but not the small band of Homo erectus watching from the ridge above. Their keen eyes have spotted something that their instincts tell them is dangerous, yet their growing intelligence recognizes as opportunity. This is the world of the fire foragers, early humans who began to understand that destruction could also mean abundance. The individual we might call the scout of this particular group is a weathered female. Her face marked by sun and wind, her body lean and muscular from decades of survival on the savanna. She's seen fires before, many times, but today, something is different. Today, she's going to make a choice that will echo through generations. Slowly, carefully, she begins to descend toward the burned area. Every step is calculated, every sense alert. The ground is still warm beneath her bare feet, but no longer burning hot. Small wisps of smoke rise from hidden embers, and she learns to read these signs like a map. Where the smoke is thick and white, the fire still smolders dangerously. Where it's thin and gray, the heat is fading. Our first discovery comes almost immediately. The twisted form of a small antelope lies near a fallen tree, its body cooked by the flames that swept through. She approaches cautiously, using a long stick to prod the carcass. It's unlike any meat she's ever encountered. The tough, raw flesh she's used to has been transformed into something tender and easily pulled apart. The taste, when she finally works up the courage to try it, is a revelation. The fire has not only killed this animal, it has improved it, made it more digestible, more flavorful. But the real treasures lie underground. As she explores further, guided by the other members of her group who have now joined her in this cautious investigation, she discovers that the fire has transformed the very earth itself. Tubers that normally require hours of chewing to extract any nutrition have been baked to sweet, soft perfection. Nuts that would have been impossible to crack with stone tools have split open from the heat, revealing their nutritious contents. This is the birth of humanity's first economic revolution, though the participants have no concept of economics or revolution. What they understand is that fire creates value where none existed before. It takes the inedible and makes it edible, the difficult and makes it easy, the dangerous and makes it beneficial. Word of this discovery spreads through the group with the rapid efficiency of survival knowledge. Within hours, every member of the band is exploring the burned landscape, developing techniques for safely approaching still warm areas, learning to distinguish between dangerous heat and beneficial warmth. They discover that certain types of wood retain heat longer than others, that buried tubers stay warm for days, that even insects and small reptiles caught in the fire become palatable protein sources. But perhaps the most crucial discovery comes from the youngest members of the group. Children, with their natural fearlessness and curiosity, venture closer to the smoldering remains than the adults dare. It's a bold youngster who first notices that some embers, while too hot to touch directly, can be handled if wrapped in green leaves. More importantly, these embers stay warm long after the main fire has died, glowing orange in the darkness when gently blown upon. This observation marks a turning point in human relationship with fire. For the first time, one of our ancestors has moved beyond simply benefiting from fire to actually interacting with it. The wrapped ember represents humanity's first tool for fire transportation, crude though it may be. When the group moves on from this burned area, they carry with them not just the memory of cooked food, but an actual piece of the fire itself. The challenges of maintaining this ember teach them volumes about fire's nature. They learn that it needs to breathe, wrapping it too tightly smothers it. They discover that certain materials feed it while others extinguish it. Dry grass and twigs make it flare up, while wet vegetation kills it instantly. They begin to understand that fire is not just a force, but almost a living thing with needs and behaviors that can be predicted and influenced. These early fire foragers develop increasingly sophisticated strategies. They learn to read the landscape for signs of recent fires, recognizing the patterns that lightning creates versus those made by spontaneous combustion in dry vegetation. They discover that certain weather conditions, the first storms after a dry season, the electrical activity that accompanies seasonal changes, are more likely to produce fires. Groups begin to modify their movement patterns to take advantage of fire opportunities. Instead of following only game trails and water sources, they start factoring fire probability into their migration routes. Areas known to burn frequently become seasonal destinations, visited not for their immediate resources, but for the potential fire benefits they might provide. The social implications are profound. Knowledge about fire behavior becomes valuable information to be shared and remembered. Elders, who can read weather patterns and predict fire-prone conditions, gain new status within the group. Young adults who show courage in approaching fires and skill in handling warm embers become respected specialists. But it's the cognitive changes that may be most significant. Engaging with fire requires abstract thinking in ways that traditional foraging and hunting do not. Understanding fire means grasping concepts like delayed gratification. The ember wrapped today might provide cooking heat tomorrow. It requires cause and effect reasoning. Certain actions will make the ember grow stronger. Others will destroy it. Most challengingly, it demands the ability to see potential where others see only risk. These mental exercises begin to reshape the Homo erectus brain in subtle but important ways. Archaeological evidence suggests that brain size was already increasing during this period, and some researchers theorize that the cognitive demands of fire interaction contributed to this growth. Learning to think about fire, its behavior, its needs, its potential required new neural pathways and more complex planning abilities. The fire foraging period also introduces new social dynamics. Groups that successfully incorporate fire benefits into their survival strategies begin to outcompete those that don't. The additional nutrition from cooked foods supports larger brain development in children. The extended daylight provided by glowing embers allows for more social interaction and knowledge transfer. Even primitive ember carrying gives groups mobility advantages, allowing them to venture into areas where natural fire is less common. Not every attempt at fire interaction is successful. Many embers die despite careful tending. Some individuals suffer burns while learning to handle fire materials safely. Groups occasionally find themselves trapped between recovering from fire foraging expeditions and dealing with fresh natural fires. The learning curve is steep and sometimes deadly. Yet those who persist gain capabilities that transform their survival prospects. Fire foraging groups begin to show the first signs of what we might recognize as human innovation. They develop better tools for handling hot materials, create simple fire-safe storage areas for carrying embers, and establish the first fire-tending protocols that ensure the precious glowing coals don't die accidentally. As this chapter in human development closes, Homo erectus stands at another threshold. They have moved from fleeing fire to following it, from fearing it to foraging with it. They understand that fire can be beneficial, that it can be approached safely with the right knowledge and tools, and most crucially, that it can be influenced and directed, at least in small ways. The transition from fire foraging to actual fire control may seem like a small step, but it represents a conceptual leap as significant as any in human evolution. These early humans are beginning to think of fire not as an uncontrollable natural force, but as a potential partner in their survival. They're learning that the natural world, powerful though it may be, responds to intelligence, observation, and careful action. The next challenge will be even greater, moving from finding and following fire to actually capturing and keeping it alive. This will require not just courage and intelligence, but the development of entirely new technologies and the emergence of social structures sophisticated enough to support continuous fire maintenance. Chapter 3. The First Spark. The moment that would change everything began with an accident. Picture a Homo erectus craftsman, perhaps 1.7 million years ago, sitting in the dappled shade of an acacia tree. His weathered hands work with practiced precision, striking one stone against another, carefully shaping what will become a hand axe. Chip after chip falls away as he naps the flint, each impact creating tiny sparks that dance briefly in the air before dying on the ground. On this particular day, the sparks land on an unusually dry pile of grass that has accumulated near his work site. Most fall harmlessly, winking out in milliseconds. But one spark, just one, lands on a fragment of tender dry bark. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then, impossibly, miraculously, the bark begins to glow. Our craftsman freezes. He's seen fire many times, the devastating blazes that sweep across the savannah, the smoldering remains of lightning strikes, the precious embers his people have learned to scavenge and transport. But he has never seen fire born from the work of his own hands. The implications crash over him with the force of revelation. Fire is not just something that happens. Fire is something that can be made. This scene, while imagined, represents one of the most plausible scenarios for humanity's first step toward true fire control. Archaeological evidence from sites like Kubifora in Kenya suggests that Homo erectus was regularly creating stone tools in the same areas where we find the earliest evidence of controlled fire use. The connection between tool-making and fire-making may not be coincidental. The physics of this discovery are elegantly simple. When two pieces of flint or pyrite-bearing rock strike each other with sufficient force, they create sparks that can reach temperatures of over 800 degrees Celsius, hot enough to ignite dry tinder. The same precise hand-eye coordination required for sophisticated tool-making also provides the motor skills necessary for fire-making. The same understanding of stone properties that allows for effective knapping also enables the selection of fire-producing rocks. But recognizing the potential of this accidental discovery required a cognitive leap that shouldn't be underestimated. Our craftsman had to understand that the tiny spark and the massive wildfires he witnessed were fundamentally the same phenomenon. He had to grasp that this microfire could potentially become a macrofire with the right encouragement. Most remarkably, he had to overcome millions of years of evolutionary programming that told him fire was dangerous and should be avoided. The first attempts to recreate this accident were likely frustrated failures. Fire-making, even with the knowledge that it's possible, requires precise technique and perfect materials. The tinder must be absolutely dry and finely divided. The sparks must be produced in rapid succession and directed accurately. The transition from spark to flame must be managed with just the right amount of airflow and fuel. Archaeological evidence suggests that these early fire makers experimented extensively with different materials. Microscopic analysis of ancient living sites reveals evidence of various organic materials that could have served as tinder, shredded bark, dry grass, animal fur, and even bird nests. The most successful early fire makers likely discovered that certain fungi, particularly bracket fungi that grow on dead trees, make exceptional tinder when dried and processed correctly. The social implications of intentional fire making were enormous. For the first time in human evolution, the ability to create fire became a learnable skill rather than a lucky discovery. This meant that knowledge about fire could be passed from one generation to the next, refined and improved over time. It also meant that certain individuals could become fire specialists, developing expertise that made them valuable to their groups. These early fire makers faced significant challenges. Stone tool production was already time-consuming and required considerable skill. Adding fire making to their toolkit meant mastering an entirely new set of techniques while maintaining their existing survival skills. The materials needed for fire making proper stones, dry tinder, kindling had to be gathered and maintained alongside traditional tools and supplies. Weather presented constant obstacles. The same conditions that made fire most necessary, cold, wet periods, also made fire making most difficult. Keeping tinder dry during the rainy season required foresight and planning. Producing sparks when hands were cold and stiff from winter temperatures demanded extraordinary dedication to practice and technique. The energy expenditure was also significant. Creating fire through stone percussion is physically demanding work. In times when calories were scarce and every action had to contribute to survival, spending energy on fire-making attempts was a risky investment. Groups that mastered the technique gained enormous advantages, but groups that wasted energy on failed attempts faced increased survival pressure. Yet the benefits, when achieved, were transformational. Fire-making capability gave Homo erectus unprecedented control over their environment. They could create light when darkness fell, warmth when temperatures dropped, and cooking heat when raw food was insufficient. For the first time, humans could modify their immediate environment to meet their needs, rather than simply adapting to whatever conditions they encountered. The psychological impact may have been even more significant than the practical benefits. Creating fire represented humanity's first true mastery over a natural force. These early humans were no longer simply reacting to their environment. They were actively changing it. The confidence and sense of capability that came from fire-making likely influenced other aspects of their behavior, encouraging greater experimentation and innovation. Different groups probably discovered fire-making independently multiple times. The archaeological record suggests that fire use appeared at roughly similar times across different regions where Homo erectus lived, implying either rapid cultural transmission or independent invention. Each group would have developed their own techniques and preferences based on local materials and conditions. The stone percussion method was probably not the only fire-making technique discovered during this period. Homo erectus had already demonstrated sophisticated understanding of wood properties through their tool-making. It is likely that some groups also experimented with friction-based fire-making methods, perhaps initially by accident when wooden tools generated heat through use. The drill method, where a wooden stick is rapidly rotated against a wooden base, requires even more precise technique than stone percussion, but can be more reliable once mastered. Archaeological evidence from later periods shows clear signs of drill-made fires, suggesting this technology may have been developed earlier than previously thought. Fire-making knowledge became one of humanity's first intellectual technologies, information that existed independently of physical tools and could be transmitted purely through teaching and demonstration. This marked the beginning of cumulative cultural evolution, where knowledge could build upon previous knowledge across generations. The individuals who first mastered fire-making likely held special status within their groups. They possessed a capability that directly contributed to survival and comfort in ways that everyone could understand and appreciate. This may have been humanity's first recognition of technical expertise as a form of social value. The development of fire-making also required the creation of specialized toolkits. Firemakers needed to maintain collections of suitable striking stones, carefully prepared tinder materials, and kindling supplies. These fire-making kits represent some of humanity's first portable technology systems designed for a specific technical purpose. Quality control became crucial as groups became dependent on reliable fire-making. Firemakers had to develop methods for testing and maintaining their materials, ensuring that stones would produce sparks reliably and that tinder would ignite consistently. This attention to tool performance and maintenance became a foundation for all subsequent human technologies. The teaching of fire-making skills required the development of systematic instructional methods. Unlike tool-making, which could be learned through observation and imitation, fire-making involved understanding invisible processes and managing precise timing. Firemakers had to develop ways to explain abstract concepts and transfer complex motor skills to learners. The storage and transportation of fire-making materials became logistical challenges that drove innovation in portable technology. Groups needed methods for keeping tinder dry, protecting striking stones from damage, and organizing fire-making supplies for quick access during emergencies. As our chapter concludes, we see Homo erectus poised at yet another evolutionary threshold. They have moved from finding fire to following it, from foraging its benefits to actually creating it themselves. The ability to make fire on demand represents one of the most significant technological achievements in human history, ranking alongside the development of language, agriculture, and the invention of writing. But creating fire is only the first step. The next challenges will be equally demanding: learning to maintain fires once started, developing techniques for controlling fire behavior, and creating the social structures necessary to support continuous fire use. The journey from the first accidentally created spark to the sophisticated fire technologies that would allow Homo erectus to spread across the globe is just beginning. Chapter 4. Learning Fire's Language. The small flame dances hypnotically in the evening breeze, casting flickering shadows across the faces of our Homo erectus ancestors. It has been 3 hours since the firemaker in the group successfully created this spark from nothing but stones and dried grass. And already they're learning that making fire is only the beginning of the challenge. Keeping it alive requires a completely different set of skills that will determine whether this group survives the night or finds themselves once again at the mercy of darkness and cold. This is the story of humanity's second great fire revolution. Learning to speak fire's language, to understand its needs, its moods, and its behavior. Creating a spark was miraculous enough, but transforming that spark into a sustained, useful fire required observations and insights that would fundamentally change how our ancestors thought about the natural world. The young woman tending this particular fire has become fascinated by its behavior. She's noticed that fire seems to have preferences, almost like a living creature. Feed it dry grass, and it flares up hungrily, consuming the fuel in moments and demanding more. Give it thick logs, and it sulks, threatening to die unless she encourages it with careful breath. But provide it with medium-sized twigs, and it settles into a steady, contented burn that can last for hours. These observations represent the birth of scientific thinking in human development. Our fire tenders were developing hypotheses about fire behavior, testing them through experimentation and revising their understanding based on results. They were learning to think systematically about cause and effect, to predict outcomes based on inputs, and to manipulate variables to achieve desired results. The physics of fire, while complex in detail, follows patterns that intelligent observers can learn to recognize. Fire needs 3 things to survive: fuel, oxygen, and heat. Remove any one of these elements, and the fire dies. Homo erectus fire tenders didn't understand the chemistry involved, but they began to grasp these relationships through careful observation and experimentation. Fuel management became their first expertise. Different materials burned in different ways, and successful firekeepers learned to categorize these materials by their burning characteristics. Dry grasses and leaves caught quickly, but burned out fast, perfect for starting fires or creating quick flares for light. Small twigs and thin branches provided sustained burning for cooking and warmth. Larger pieces of wood burned slowly and steadily, creating the long-lasting coals perfect for overnight fires. But the most crucial discovery was understanding fire's relationship with air. The fire tender would notice that when she leaned close to blow on the flames, they responded by burning brighter and hotter. When she restricted airflow by building the fire in a sheltered location, it would dim and sometimes die. This led to the development of humanity's first fire management techniques, creating windbreaks to protect flames from being blown out, but ensuring enough airflow to keep the fire healthy. The social aspects of fire tending created new dynamics within Homo erectus groups. Maintaining a fire required constant attention. Someone needed to monitor it throughout the day. At night, adding fuel before it burned too low, protecting it from rain or wind, and ensuring it didn't spread beyond control. This necessitated the development of shift systems, with different group members taking responsibility for fire care during different periods. Children played a crucial role in this system. Their natural curiosity about fire, combined with their availability for constant monitoring duties, made them ideal fire tenders during daylight hours. Under careful adult supervision, young people learned to read fire signals. The color of flames that indicated good burning, the sound of crackling that meant proper fuel consumption, the appearance of coals that showed a fire was ready for cooking. The learning process was often dangerous. Burns were inevitable as fire tenders experimented with different techniques and materials. Some individuals suffered serious injuries from fires that spread beyond control or exploded when the wrong materials were added. Groups occasionally lost their fires entirely, facing the daunting prospect of starting over from scratch or surviving without fire until they could obtain it elsewhere. Yet these challenges drove innovation. Homo erectus firekeepers developed increasingly sophisticated techniques for fire safety and management. They learned to create fire boundaries using rocks or cleared earth. They discovered that certain green plant materials could be used to control flame spread. They developed methods for banking fires, covering them with ash or sand to slow burning, while keeping coals alive for easy rekindling. The development of fire transportation techniques marked another major advancement. Carrying fire from place to place required understanding not just how to keep flames alive, but how to transport them safely. Early fire carriers experimented with different materials for holding coals: hollow bones, large shells, even carefully shaped pieces of bark. They learned that certain types of slow-burning wood could serve as portable fire sources, smoldering for hours while being carried and easily blown back to flame when needed. Weather presented constant challenges that drove further innovation. Rain could extinguish fires instantly, making shelter construction a priority. Snow and cold temperatures made fire maintenance more difficult, but also more critical for survival. Summer heat made fire less necessary for warmth, but created dangerous fire spread conditions. Successful firekeepers learned to adapt their techniques to seasonal conditions, developing different strategies for different times of year. The cognitive demands of fire management accelerated brain development in Homo erectus populations. Managing fire required forward planning, gathering fuel before it was needed, preparing for weather changes, maintaining supplies of tinder and kindling. It demanded pattern recognition, understanding how different materials behaved, predicting fire behavior under various conditions, recognizing signs of potential problems before they became critical. Most importantly, fire management required abstract thinking about invisible processes. Firekeepers had to understand concepts like heat conservation, airflow dynamics, and fuel consumption rates without any formal scientific framework. They were developing intuitive physics through hands-on experimentation, creating mental models of fire behavior that allowed them to predict and control outcomes. The language of fire became one of humanity's first technical vocabularies. Different types of flames, fuel materials, and fire conditions required distinct terminology for effective communication. Groups that developed precise fire-related language could transmit knowledge more effectively, leading to faster skill development and better fire management across the community. Regional variations in fire techniques began to emerge as different groups adapted to local conditions and materials. Desert populations developed methods for conserving fuel in resource-scarce environments. Forest dwellers learned to manage fires safely in areas where fire spread was a constant danger. Coastal groups discovered how to maintain fires in high humidity conditions where traditional techniques failed. Trade in fire-related materials may have begun during this period. High-quality tinder, fire-making stones, and slow-burning transport materials could be valuable commodities worth traveling considerable distances to obtain. This created some of humanity's first specialized resource networks, with different groups providing different materials needed for successful fire management. The psychological effects of fire mastery were profound. Groups that successfully maintained fires developed a sense of environmental control that influenced their approach to other challenges. The confidence that came from being able to create light in darkness, warmth in cold, and cooking heat at will encourage greater exploration and risk-taking in other areas of life. Fire also became a social focal point in ways that shaped human development for millions of years to come. The fire was a gathering place where knowledge was shared, stories were told, and social bonds were strengthened. The extended daylight provided by flames allowed for increased social interaction, contributing to the development of more complex communication and cultural transmission. The development of specialized fire tools marked this period as a time of significant technological innovation. Firekeepers created implements for safely handling burning materials, tools for efficiently arranging fuel, and devices for controlling airflow. These specialized tools represented some of humanity's first examples of technology designed specifically for managing other technology. The establishment of permanent firekeeping protocols within groups created some of humanity's first formal procedures and rules. Fire safety became a community responsibility, with established methods for preventing accidents, responding to emergencies, and ensuring continuous fire maintenance. These protocols represented early examples of institutional knowledge and community standards. As Chapter 4 draws to a close, we see Homo erectus groups that have fundamentally transformed their relationship with fire. They have moved beyond the simple ability to create flames to developing sophisticated fire management systems that require planning, cooperation, and technical expertise. They understand fire not as a mysterious natural force, but as a manageable tool with predictable behaviors and controllable outcomes. This mastery of fire's language represents another crucial step in human cognitive evolution. The mental skills required for effective fire management, abstract thinking, cause and effect reasoning, long-term planning, and systematic experimentation are the same cognitive foundations that would eventually enable humans to develop agriculture, build civilizations, and create technologies that would transform the world. Chapter 5: The Cave of Wonders. Deep beneath the earth in what is now South Africa, a limestone cave holds secrets that would remain hidden for nearly 1,000,000 years. Wonderwork Cave, as modern archaeologists would eventually name it, stretches back into the hillside like a stone throat, its mouth yawning open to the ancient African landscape. But unlike the countless other caves that dot this region, Wonderwork holds evidence of something extraordinary, the first sustained, controlled use of fire in human history. Picture the scene 1,000,000 years ago. A small group of Homo erectus, perhaps a dozen individuals, approaches the cave entrance cautiously. They've been tracking a herd of antelope for days, and the animals have taken shelter in this natural refuge. But as our early humans peer into the darkness, they face a dilemma that has confronted their kind for millennia. The cave offers protection and potential resources, but its depths are shrouded in impenetrable blackness. This time, however, something is different. The group's firekeeper carries with her a precious bundle carefully maintained embers wrapped in green leaves, the glowing heart of a fire that has been kept alive for weeks as the band traveled across the landscape. For the first time in human history, our ancestors are about to carry fire into the depths of the earth, transforming a dark, dangerous space into humanity's first illuminated home. The moment when the first torch blazes to life in Wonderwork Cave represents a revolution in human capability that cannot be overstated. Suddenly, the impenetrable darkness yields to dancing flames that reveal hidden chambers, water sources, and safe sleeping areas far from the reach of predators. The cave, which had been merely a temporary shelter, becomes something unprecedented, a human-controlled environment. Archaeological evidence from Wonderwork Cave tells us this story with remarkable precision. Deep within the cave, far from the entrance where natural fires could never reach, researchers have found microscopic traces of wood ash, burned bone fragments, and evidence of systematic fire use dating back 1,000,000 years. This wasn't accidental burning from lightning strikes or wildfires. This was deliberate, sustained fire use by early humans who had learned to carry flames into the earth itself. The implications of cave fire use were enormous and immediate. For the first time, Homo erectus could occupy spaces that were completely protected from weather, predators, and environmental dangers. The cave provided consistent temperature, protection from seasonal variations, and security that allowed for longer-term occupation than any previous human habitat. But using fire in caves required entirely new techniques and understanding. Cave environments present unique challenges for fire management that our ancestors had to solve through careful observation and experimentation. Air circulation in caves follows patterns completely different from open-air fires. Smoke behavior changes dramatically in enclosed spaces. Fuel consumption rates alter when fires burn in the still air of underground chambers. The first cave fire tenders had to learn to read the subtle signs of air movement within the cave system. They discovered that some chambers had natural ventilation that drew smoke upward and outward, while others trapped smoke dangerously. They learned to position fires at specific locations where air currents would carry smoke away from living areas while maintaining the warmth and light needed for human activities. The development of cave lighting represents humanity's first systematic approach to interior design and space management. Early cave dwellers learned to position fires strategically to illuminate the areas they needed while conserving fuel and maintaining safety. They discovered that reflective cave walls could amplify light, that certain types of flames provided better illumination than others, and that multiple small fires could be more effective than single large ones. The social organization required for cave fire management was more complex than anything Homo erectus had previously developed. Someone needed to maintain fires continuously to prevent the group from being plunged into complete darkness. Fuel had to be gathered from outside and transported into the cave. Smoke and air quality had to be monitored to prevent suffocation. Fire safety became critical when escape routes were limited and stone walls could trap heat to dangerous levels. These challenges drove the development of humanity's first formal fire management protocols. Cave-dwelling groups established rules about fire placement, fuel storage, and smoke management. They developed shift systems for fire maintenance that ensured continuous lighting without exhausting any individual. They created emergency procedures for dealing with fires that burned out of control in confined spaces. The cognitive demands of cave fire management accelerated human brain development in new directions. Managing fire in three-dimensional cave spaces required spatial reasoning abilities that surface fire management didn't demand. Understanding air circulation patterns required abstract thinking about invisible air movements. Planning fuel needs for extended cave occupation demanded longer-term thinking than nomadic groups typically employed. Cave occupation also enabled new forms of cultural development that would shape human evolution for millions of years. The extended protection provided by cave fires allowed for longer social gatherings, more elaborate tool-making sessions, and the development of more complex group activities. Children could be educated more systematically in spaces where attention didn't need to be constantly divided between learning and predator vigilance. The earliest cave artists may have emerged during this period, inspired by the dancing shadows that flames cast on cave walls. While the sophisticated cave paintings of later human cultures were still hundreds of thousands of years in the future, the basic human fascination with how light and shadow could create images likely began with these first cave fires. Food preparation capabilities expanded dramatically in cave environments. The controlled conditions allowed for more systematic cooking experiments, longer food preparation processes, and the development of food storage techniques that took advantage of the cave's stable temperatures. Groups could process larger quantities of plant materials, experiment with different cooking methods, and maintain food supplies for extended periods. The security provided by cave fires enabled Homo erectus groups to grow larger and more stable than had been possible in open-air camps. Children could survive to adulthood more reliably when protected from weather and predators. Elderly individuals could contribute to the group longer when not constantly exposed to environmental stresses. The population dynamics of cave-dwelling groups began to differ significantly from their nomadic relatives. Regional specialization in cave fire techniques began to emerge as different groups adapted to different types of cave systems. Groups living in limestone caves developed different methods than those in sandstone caves. Deep cave systems required different fire management approaches than shallow overhangs. Coastal caves with high humidity demanded different techniques than desert caves with extremely dry conditions. The tools required for cave fire management drove innovations in portable technology. Cave dwellers needed efficient methods for transporting fuel, containing fires safely, and managing smoke in confined spaces. They developed specialized fire containers, improved torches for cave exploration, and better techniques for maintaining embers during extended underground stays. Perhaps most importantly, cave fires created humanity as first permanent installations, fixed improvements to natural spaces that enhanced their utility for human occupation. The fire pits, smoke channels, and fuel storage areas that cave dwellers created represented the earliest human architecture, primitive, but functional modifications to natural spaces that made them more suitable for human needs. The success of cave fire management had evolutionary implications that extended far beyond the caves themselves. Groups that mastered cave occupation could survive in regions and climates that would have been impossible for surface-dwelling populations. This expanded the potential range for Homo erectus expansion and provided population centers that could support larger communities and more complex social development. Trade relationships between cave-dwelling and surface-dwelling groups may have begun during this period. Cave dwellers could offer security and processing facilities, while surface groups could provide resources and information about external conditions. These early trade relationships required the development of more sophisticated communication and social protocols. The psychological effects of controlled indoor environments cannot be underestimated. For the first time in human evolution, our ancestors experienced complete environmental control spaces where they determined lighting, temperature, air circulation, and security. This sense of mastery over their immediate environment likely contributed to increased confidence and willingness to experiment with other forms of environmental manipulation. Cave fire management also introduced concepts that would become fundamental to human civilization. The idea of permanent residence, the importance of infrastructure maintenance, the value of secured storage space, and the benefits of specialized environmental control. These concepts, first developed in fire-lit caves a million years ago, would eventually evolve into cities, buildings, and all forms of human architecture. The establishment of cave fire traditions created some of humanity's first location-specific cultural practices. Different caves developed their own fire management customs, lighting traditions, and social protocols that were passed down through generations of occupants. This represents an early form of place-based cultural identity that would become characteristic of human societies. The technological innovations required for successful cave fire management accelerated the pace of human technological development. The challenges of lighting, ventilation, fuel management, and safety in cave environments drove innovations that had applications far beyond underground living. These innovations became part of a growing toolkit of technologies that enhanced human survival capabilities. As this chapter concludes, we see Homo erectus standing at the threshold of their greatest adventure. Masters of fire creation, experts in fire management, and pioneers of cave occupation. They possess all the tools necessary for the next phase of human expansion. The controlled environments they've created provide the security and resources needed to support larger populations and longer-range expeditions. Chapter 6. Following the Flames. The ancient coastline stretches endlessly before them, waves lapping against shores that have never known human footsteps. But this small band of Homo erectus isn't focused on the ocean's majesty. They were tracking something far more precious than scenic beauty. Thin columns of smoke rise in the distance, marking the location of a natural fire. And our ancestors are following these signals like a roadmap across the landscape. This is the story of humanity's first great migration, driven not by wanderlust or overpopulation, but by an endless quest for fire. The mastery of flame that began in African caves has now enabled Homo erectus to venture into territories that would have been impossible to survive without controlled heat and light. They are following the flames across continents, and in doing so, they're about to spread human consciousness to every corner of the accessible world. The relationship between fire and human migration is more intimate than most people realize. Archaeological evidence suggests that the major expansion of Homo erectus out of Africa, beginning around 1.8 million years ago, corresponds closely with the earliest evidence of systematic fire use. This is uncoincidental. Fire was the enabling technology that made human survival possible in the diverse and challenging environments they would encounter beyond their African homeland. Consider the enormous challenges facing any early human group attempting to leave Africa. The journey north led through desert regions where water was scarce and fuel for fires even scarcer. The route east traversed mountains where temperatures dropped below anything their tropical adapted bodies had ever experienced. The path into Asia meant crossing rivers, navigating forests, and adapting to completely new ecosystems with unfamiliar plants and animals. Without fire, these journeys would have been suicide missions. But with the ability to create warmth, cook unfamiliar foods, and extend daylight hours for travel and tool-making, suddenly the impossible became merely difficult. Fire transformed Homo erectus from a tropical species limited to warm, familiar environments into the world's first truly global human population. The fire-tracking behaviors that had developed in Africa became essential survival skills during migration. Groups learned to read the landscape for signs of natural fires, the distinctive colors of smoke plumes, the behavior of fleeing animals, the atmospheric conditions that preceded lightning strikes. They developed navigation techniques based on following fire sources across unfamiliar terrain. But perhaps most crucially, migrating groups had to master the art of fire transportation across long distances. This required innovations in portable fire technology that went far beyond the simple ember-carrying techniques used for short movements. Long-distance migration demanded reliable methods for keeping fires alive for days or weeks, while traveling through regions where fuel sources were unknown or unavailable. The development of slow-burning fire carriers marks one of humanity's first sophisticated portable technologies. Migrating groups experimented with different materials that could maintain smoldering combustion for extended periods. Certain types of fungus that burned slowly and consistently, specially prepared wood that could smolder for days, even animal materials like dried dung that provided both fuel and portability. These fire-carrying technologies had to be incredibly reliable because failure meant death. A group that lost its fire while crossing a desert or navigating a mountain pass faced exposure, starvation, and predation without the protection that flames provided. The responsibility for maintaining traveling fires became one of the most critical specialist roles in migrating communities. The cognitive demands of fire-enabled migration accelerated human brain development in new directions. Successful migration required advanced planning abilities. Groups had to anticipate fuel needs for unknown territories, predict weather patterns in unfamiliar climates, and develop contingency plans for fire emergencies in environments where backup resources might not exist. Navigation skills became increasingly sophisticated as groups learned to use fire-related landmarks for long-distance travel. The locations of previous natural fires, the seasonal patterns of lightning activity, and the distribution of fire-suitable materials all became part of complex mental maps that enabled successful long-distance movement. Different migration routes presented unique fire-related challenges that drove specialized technological development. Desert crossers developed techniques for conserving fuel and creating fires from minimal materials. Mountain travelers learned to manage fires in thin air and extreme cold. Forest migrants mastered fire safety techniques that prevented accidental blazes in fire-prone environments. The social organization of migrating groups evolved to support the intensive fire management requirements of long-distance travel. Specialist firekeepers became essential community members whose status rivaled that of the best hunters or toolmakers. Fire knowledge became one of the most valuable forms of cultural capital, carefully transmitted from experienced travelers to newcomers. Communication systems developed around fire management became some of humanity's first technical languages. Groups needed precise terminology for different types of fuel, fire conditions, and fire-making techniques. They developed gestural communication systems for coordinating fire activities when verbal communication was impossible or dangerous. The establishment of fire-based camps along migration routes created humanity's first infrastructure networks. Successful migrating groups learned to create way stations where fuel could be cached, fire-making materials stored, and fire management knowledge transferred between different traveling parties. These proto-settlements became nodes in expanding human networks that facilitated further migration. Regional fire technologies began to diverge as different groups adapted to different environments along their migration routes. Mediterranean migrants developed techniques optimized for the dry, fire-prone landscapes they encountered. Northern travelers created methods for managing fires in humid, cold conditions. Eastern groups learned to work with completely different types of vegetation and fuel sources. The interaction between migrating and settled populations created some of humanity's first cultural exchange systems. Traveling groups brought fire technologies from distant regions, while settled populations shared local fire management knowledge. These exchanges accelerated technological development and created cultural connections across vast geographical distances. Environmental adaptation through fire management enabled Homo erectus to occupy ecological niches that no other primate had ever accessed. Fire allowed them to process plant foods that were otherwise inedible, hunt animals that were normally too dangerous to approach, and survive in climates that exceeded their biological tolerances. The success of fire-enabled migration had evolutionary consequences that shaped human development for millions of years. Populations that successfully migrated into new environments faced different selective pressures that encouraged continued brain development, sophistication, and enhanced social cooperation. The psychological effects of successful migration may have been as important as the practical benefits. Groups that successfully crossed vast distances and adapted to completely new environments developed a sense of capability and mastery that influenced their approach to other challenges. The confidence that came from conquering unknown territories encouraged greater experimentation and innovation. Trade relationships began to develop along migration routes as different groups specialized in different aspects of fire technology. Some communities became known for producing high-quality fire-making stones, others for creating superior tinder materials, still others for developing innovative fire transportation techniques. The establishment of far-flung human populations connected by fire technology created the first global human cultural network. Knowledge, techniques, and innovations could now spread across continents through chains of connected communities, accelerating technological development far beyond what isolated populations could achieve. Climate change events that would have devastated pre-fire human populations became manageable challenges for migrating Homo erectus groups. Droughts, cold periods, and other environmental stresses could be survived by moving to more favorable regions, using fire to create habitable microenvironments, or adapting fire technologies to new conditions. The genetic diversity introduced by successful migration and the cognitive challenges of adaptation to new environments may have contributed to continued human brain evolution. Populations that successfully migrated showed increased brain sizes and technological sophistication compared to their more sedentary relatives. The development of seasonal migration patterns based on fire availability created some of humanity's first systematic approaches to resource management. Groups learned to time their movements to coincide with natural fire seasons, to follow predictable patterns of lightning activity, and to coordinate their migrations with the movements of fire-following animals. The creation of fire signal communication networks enabled migrating groups to coordinate activities across vast distances. Smoke signals, beacon fires, and coordinated fire displays allowed different bands to maintain contact, share information about resources and dangers, and coordinate large-scale movements. The establishment of fire-based territorial markers may have begun during this period as different groups claimed and defended productive fire-making regions. Areas with superior fire-making stones, abundant tinder sources, or reliable fuel supplies became valuable territories worth protecting and controlling. The development of fire-based weather prediction techniques enabled migrating groups to plan their movements more effectively. Firekeepers learned to read atmospheric conditions that preceded natural fires, to predict seasonal patterns of lightning activity, and to anticipate weather changes that would affect fire management. The integration of fire technology with hunting strategies created new possibilities for large-scale game management. Migrating groups learned to use controlled burns to drive game, to create favorable hunting conditions, and to process large quantities of meat for extended travel. The establishment of fire teaching traditions within migrating communities ensured that fire knowledge could be transmitted reliably across generations and geographic regions. Master firekeepers developed systematic methods for training apprentices, testing fire skills, and maintaining quality standards in fire technology. As this chapter concludes, we see Homo erectus spreading across the ancient world like sparks from a fire. From their origins in Africa, fire-wielding human populations now occupy diverse environments across Asia, establishing communities from the tropical islands of Indonesia to the cold steppes of northern China. Each population faces unique challenges that drive continued innovation in fire technology and human adaptation. Chapter 7. The Great Migration. The morning sun rises over the Caucasus Mountains, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of gold and rose. In a sheltered valley below, a small band of Homo erectus huddles around a carefully maintained fire, their breath visible in the crisp mountain air. These are not African plains dwellers anymore. These are the descendants of the Great Migration. Humans who have carried the gift of fire across thousands of miles and countless generations to reach the very edge of Europe. This scene, played out around 1.8 million years ago in what is now Georgia, represents one of the most remarkable achievements in human prehistory. The site of Dmanisi, where archaeologists would eventually uncover evidence of these early migrants, tells the story of how fire-wielding Homo erectus accomplished something unprecedented in the history of life on Earth. They became the first African species to successfully colonize temperate regions outside their continent of origin. The Great Migration of Homo erectus was not a single exodus, but a series of expansions that unfolded over hundreds of thousands of years. It began with small groups following river valleys out of Africa, tracking seasonal resources and favorable climates. But as these populations grew and adapted to new environments, they began to push further into territories that would have been uninhabitable without the environmental control that fire provided. The route through the Middle East presented the first major challenges for fire-dependent migrants. The landscape was dramatically different from the African savannas, where fire management techniques had originally developed. Desert regions required new approaches to fuel conservation and ember transportation. Mountain passes demanded fire-making techniques that worked in thin air and extreme temperature variations. River crossings necessitated waterproof fire storage methods. These environmental challenges drove rapid innovation in portable fire technology. migrating groups developed increasingly sophisticated fire-carrying devices. Hollowed bones that could protect embers from wind and moisture, specially prepared bark containers that could maintain smoldering materials for days, and slow-burning composite materials that combined different organic substances for extended burn times. The social organization required for successful long-distance migration transformed Homo erectus communities in fundamental ways. Fire management became a 24-hour responsibility that required careful coordination between multiple specialists. Someone had to maintain the main fire, others had to manage portable fire sources, and scouts had to search ahead for fuel sources and suitable camping locations. The development of fire-based communication systems enabled migrating groups to coordinate activities across dispersed populations. Smoke signals, controlled fire displays, and strategically placed beacon fires allowed different bands to maintain contact while covering large territories. These communication networks created some of humanity's first information systems, enabling the rapid transmission of crucial survival knowledge across vast distances. As Homo erectus populations spread across Asia, they encountered environments that tested their fire technologies to the limit. The tropical forests of Southeast Asia required fire management techniques that could work in high humidity and dense vegetation. The dry steppes of Central Asia demanded methods for finding and conserving fuel in resource-scarce environments. The coastal regions of the Indian Ocean necessitated fire technologies that could function in salt air and seasonal monsoons. Each new environment drove specialized technological development. Forest-dwelling populations created fire-clearing techniques that allowed them to create open spaces for camping and hunting without starting uncontrolled wildfires. Steppe dwellers developed methods for burning dry grasses and animal dung when wood was unavailable. Coastal groups learned to use driftwood and seaweed as fuel sources, adapting their fire technologies to marine environments. The establishment of permanent settlements along migration routes created humanity's first infrastructure networks. These way stations served as fuel depots, tool-making centers, and knowledge transfer points for subsequent migrants. The accumulation of resources and expertise at these locations accelerated technological development and enabled more ambitious migration attempts. The encounter with new plant and animal species required constant adaptation of fire-based food processing techniques. Migrating groups had to learn which local plants could be made edible through cooking, how to process unfamiliar types of meat, and which local materials could serve as fuel or fire-making resources. This continuous experimentation drove the development of increasingly sophisticated food processing technologies. Climate variations along migration routes presented both challenges and opportunities for fire-dependent populations. Seasonal changes in fuel availability required long-term planning and resource storage techniques. Extreme weather events demanded emergency fire management protocols. But climate diversity also provided opportunities for populations to develop specialized adaptations to different environmental conditions. The genetic isolation of migrating populations, combined with the cognitive demands of constant adaptation to new environments, accelerated human brain evolution. Archaeological evidence shows that Homo erectus populations that successfully completed long-distance migrations had larger brain sizes and more sophisticated tool technologies than their more sedentary relatives. The psychological effects of successful migration cannot be understated. Groups that overcame the enormous challenges of crossing continents and adapting to completely foreign environments developed a sense of mastery and confidence that influenced their approach to all subsequent challenges. This migration mindset may have contributed to the continued expansion and technological innovation that characterized Homo erectus populations. The interaction between migrating and indigenous populations created complex dynamics that shaped human development across multiple continents. In some cases, Migrants displaced existing populations through superior fire technologies and environmental adaptation capabilities. In others, cultural exchange between groups accelerated technological development for all participants. Trade relationships developed along migration routes as different populations specialized in different aspects of fire technology and resource procurement. Communities located near high-quality fire-making stone sources became regional suppliers for migrating groups. Populations with access to superior fuel sources established trade relationships with groups from resource-poor regions. The establishment of fire-using populations across diverse environments created natural laboratories for human adaptation and innovation. Different groups faced different challenges and developed different solutions, creating a diversity of human cultures and technologies that would prove crucial for long-term survival and development. Religious and cultural practices began to develop around fire during this period of global expansion. The universal human experience of gathering around fires for warmth, light, and food preparation created shared cultural frameworks that transcended regional differences. Fire became a focal point for social interaction, knowledge transmission, and community identity. The success of fire-enabled migration fundamentally changed the relationship between humans and their environment. Instead of being limited to specific ecological niches, Homo erectus became a generalist species capable of adapting to virtually any terrestrial environment. This adaptability would prove crucial as climate changes and environmental disruptions occurred throughout human evolutionary history. The development of cold weather fire technologies represented one of the most significant achievements of the migration period. Populations that successfully adapted to temperate and even subarctic environments had to develop fire management techniques that could function in conditions of extreme cold, limited fuel availability, and challenging weather conditions. The cognitive demands of multi-environment adaptation created the foundation for abstract thinking capabilities that would become characteristic of later human development. Successfully migrating populations had to develop mental models that could predict environmental conditions, plan resource needs, and adapt technologies to completely unfamiliar circumstances. The establishment of geographically dispersed human populations created the possibility for large-scale cultural evolution. Ideas, technologies, and innovations could now spread across continents through networks of connected communities, allowing for cumulative technological development that far exceeded what isolated populations could achieve independently. The development of seasonal migration patterns based on resource availability and environmental conditions created some of humanity's first systematic approaches to landscape management. Migrating groups learned to coordinate their movements with natural cycles, to optimize their use of seasonal resources, and to minimize their environmental impact through careful timing and routing. The creation of migration-specific toolkits represented a significant advance in portable technology design. Migrating groups needed tools that were lightweight, durable, and multifunctional. They developed specialized equipment for fire transportation, weather protection, and emergency survival that could be carried efficiently over long distances. The establishment of migration traditions and oral histories created some of humanity's first systematic approaches to knowledge preservation and transmission. Successful migration routes, seasonal timing, resource locations, and survival techniques became cultural knowledge that was carefully maintained and passed down through generations. The development of environmental reading skills reached new levels of sophistication as migrating groups learned to interpret unfamiliar landscapes. They had to develop abilities to assess water quality, predict weather patterns, identify edible plants, and recognize dangerous animals in completely foreign environments. The integration of fire technology with shelter construction enabled migrating groups to create temporary habitable spaces in challenging environments. They learned to use fire for heating enclosed spaces, for drying wet materials, and for creating warm microclimates that extended their survival capabilities. The creation of emergency fire protocols for migration situations represented some of humanity's first systematic approaches to risk management. Migrating groups developed procedures for fire emergencies, backup fire-making systems, and emergency shelter construction that could save lives in crisis situations. As this chapter concludes, we see Homo erectus as a truly global species, established across Africa, Asia, and the edges of Europe. From tropical islands to mountain valleys, from coastal plains to inland steppes, fire-wielding human populations have demonstrated that intelligence and technology can overcome virtually any environmental challenge. Chapter 8. Cooking Revolution. The smell is unlike anything that has ever existed on Earth before. In a limestone cave near what will one day be Beijing, a Homo erectus woman tends a fire that holds something revolutionary. The first systematic cooking experiment in human history. The chunks of meat suspended over the flames on carefully positioned sticks are transforming in ways that will reshape human evolution itself. This is the moment, roughly 800,000 years ago, when fire stopped being just a tool for warmth and light and became humanity's first biotechnology, a means of literally redesigning the nutritional landscape and, in doing so, redesigning ourselves. The cooking revolution that begins in scenes like this will prove to be one of the most significant developments in the entire history of life on Earth. Understanding the magnitude of this transformation requires grasping just how different cooked food is from raw food at the molecular level. When plant and animal tissues are exposed to sustained heat, complex chemical reactions occur that break down tough cellular structures, denature proteins into more digestible forms, and release nutrients that would otherwise remain locked away from human metabolism. Consider the simple act of roasting a tuber over an open flame. The heat breaks down the cellulose walls that normally make plant material difficult to chew and digest. Starches gelatinize, becoming more readily available to human digestive enzymes. Proteins unfold, making their amino acids more accessible. Tough fibers soften, reducing the mechanical work required for chewing and digestion. But the transformation goes far beyond mere convenience. Cooked foods provide significantly more calories per unit of digestive effort than raw foods. This means that Homo erectus populations that mastered systematic cooking could extract more energy from the same amount of food, or maintain the same energy levels while spending less time foraging and eating. The implications for human evolution were profound and immediate. The increased caloric efficiency of cooked foods meant that the large, energy-expensive digestive systems that had characterized earlier human ancestors were no longer necessary. Over generations, populations that relied heavily on cooked foods began to show anatomical changes: smaller teeth, shorter digestive tracts, and crucially, larger brains. The development of systematic cooking techniques required innovations that went far beyond simple fire management. Early cooks had to develop methods for controlling cooking temperatures, timing cooking processes, and preventing foods from burning while ensuring adequate heat penetration. They needed tools for manipulating hot foods safely and techniques for cooking different types of foods optimally. The invention of cooking tools marks one of humanity's first forays into specialized kitchen technology. Sharp sticks for piercing and manipulating meat, flat stones for creating cooking surfaces, curved bark containers for boiling water, and specialized tongs made from split branches. These simple implements represent the beginning of culinary technology that would eventually evolve into the sophisticated cooking equipment we use today. Boiling, one of the most transformative cooking techniques, likely developed during this period through the invention of indirect heating methods. Early cooks discovered that water could be heated by dropping hot stones into containers, creating temperatures that could cook foods in ways that direct fire exposure couldn't achieve. This opened up entirely new categories of food processing. allowing for the extraction of nutrients from bones, the preparation of plant materials that required extended cooking times, and the creation of the first human-made broths and stews. The social implications of cooking were as revolutionary as the nutritional benefits. Cooking required time, attention, and shared resources in ways that raw food consumption did not. This necessitated new forms of social organization around food preparation, with different individuals taking responsibility for fuel gathering, fire maintenance, food preparation, and cooking supervision. The extended preparation time required for cooking created opportunities for social interaction that had never existed before. While foods cooked slowly over carefully maintained fires, group members could engage in tool-making, social grooming, communication, and other activities that strengthened social bonds and facilitated knowledge transfer. The cooking fire became humanity's first social center, a focal point for community life that extended far beyond mere nutrition. Children played crucial roles in the cooking revolution, both as learners and as contributors to the cooking process. The extended cooking times required constant supervision to prevent burning or undercooking, making children ideal for fire-tending duties. Simultaneously, the cooking process provided unparalleled opportunities for knowledge transmission, as young people learned not just cooking techniques, but also food identification, preparation methods, and fire management skills. The development of food storage techniques followed naturally from cooking innovations. Cooked foods could be preserved longer than raw foods under certain conditions, and early cooks discovered methods for extending the shelf life of processed foods through drying, smoking, and controlled exposure to fire. These preservation techniques allowed groups to maintain food supplies during scarce periods and reduce the daily pressure of constant foraging. Regional cooking specializations began to emerge as different populations adapted their cooking techniques to local food sources and environmental conditions. Coastal groups developed methods for cooking seafood and marine plants. Forest dwellers specialized in processing nuts, fruits, and forest game. Grassland populations became experts at cooking the seeds, roots, and large herbivores that characterized their environments. The cognitive demands of systematic cooking accelerated human brain development in multiple directions. Successful cooking required understanding of timing, temperature control, and chemical transformations that occurred during food processing. Cooks had to develop mental models of cooking processes that allowed them to predict outcomes, adjust techniques, and troubleshoot problems. Most importantly, cooking required abstract thinking about invisible processes. Understanding why certain cooking methods worked required grasping concepts like heat transfer, chemical changes, and biological transformations. This kind of abstract reasoning about non-visible phenomena provided crucial cognitive foundation for later human, technological development. The nutritional revolution enabled by systematic cooking had cascading effects throughout Homo erectus populations. The increased caloric efficiency meant that larger populations could be supported on the same resource base. The reduced time required for food processing freed up energy and attention for other activities. The improved nutrition supported brain development that enhanced problem-solving capabilities and technological innovation. Evidence for the cooking revolution comes from multiple archaeological sources. Controlled hearths with evidence of sustained, moderate temperature burning appear at numerous Homo erectus sites around 800,000 years ago. Burned bone fragments show patterns consistent with systematic cooking rather than accidental burning. Tool assemblages include implements clearly designed for food processing and cooking activities. Perhaps most tellingly, the anatomical changes in Homo erectus populations correspond closely with the archaeological evidence for systematic cooking. Brain sizes increase, tooth sizes decrease, and digestive tract modifications occur at roughly the same time that cooking evidence becomes widespread in the archaeological record. The development of cooking may have been driven partly by environmental pressures that made raw foods less available or less nutritious. Climate changes that reduced the availability of easily processed plant foods would have created selective pressure for populations that could extract more nutrition from available resources through cooking. The cooking revolution also enabled Homo erectus populations to exploit food sources that had previously been unavailable or marginally useful. Tough plant materials, difficult to digest animal parts, and seasonal food sources that required processing to be nutritious could all be converted into valuable food resources through appropriate cooking techniques. The standardization of cooking techniques within communities created some of humanity's first cultural traditions that had direct survival value. Cooking knowledge became cultural capital that could be transmitted across generations, creating the foundation for cumulative cultural evolution in food processing techniques. Trade relationships developed around cooking-related resources as different populations gained access to specialized materials needed for optimal food processing. High-quality cooking stones, superior fuel sources, and specialized food preparation tools became valuable commodities that could be exchanged between different groups. The success of cooking techniques may have contributed to the continued expansion of Homo erectus populations into new environments. Groups that could efficiently process a wide variety of food sources through cooking had advantages in adapting to new ecological niches and surviving in challenging environments. The development of cooking also created new forms of cultural expression and social bonding. The preparation and sharing of cooked foods became ritualized activities that strengthened group cohesion and cultural identity. The enhanced flavors and textures of cooked foods may have contributed to the development of aesthetic appreciation and cultural preferences. The cooking revolution established patterns of technological development that would characterize all subsequent human innovations. The systematic approach to problem solving, the experimental methods for technique improvement, and the social organization around technological activities that emerged from cooking became templates for every subsequent human technology. The psychological effects of cooking mastery were profound. Groups that could transform raw materials into improved foods developed confidence in their ability to modify and enhance natural processes. This sense of technological capability encouraged greater experimentation and innovation in other areas of life. The health benefits of systematic cooking extended beyond simple nutrition. Cooking destroyed pathogens that could cause illness, made toxic plant compounds less dangerous, and reduced the risk of foodborne diseases. These health improvements contributed to increased survival rates and population growth. As this chapter concludes, we see the cooking revolution as a transformative force that reshaped human biology, society, and technology simultaneously. The systematic application of fire to food processing created a positive feedback loop. Better nutrition supported larger brains, which enabled more sophisticated cooking techniques, which provided even better nutrition. Chapter 9. Masters of the Hearth. The hearth glows with the steady warmth of perfectly managed coals, casting dancing shadows across the cave walls as a master firekeeper demonstrates techniques that have been refined over countless generations. We are in Chasm Cave in what is now Israel, roughly 400,000 years ago, witnessing something unprecedented in the natural world. Humans who have achieved complete mastery over fire, transforming it from a wild natural force into humanity's first fully domesticated technology. This elderly Homo erectus craftsman, his hands scarred by decades of firework, embodies the culmination of nearly 1.5 million years of fire technology development. Watch as he reads the subtle signs of coal temperature by their color and sound, adjusts airflow with practiced precision, and maintains multiple fires simultaneously for different purposes. Cooking here, tool making there, warmth and light everywhere. This is no longer the desperate ember nursing of early fire users. This is fire mastery at a level that would not be surpassed for hundreds of thousands of years. The development of true fire mastery required innovations that went far beyond the basic fire-making and fire-keeping techniques of earlier periods. Master firekeepers had to understand fire as a complex system with multiple variables that could be controlled and optimized for different purposes. They needed to develop intuitive understanding of combustion chemistry, heat transfer, fuel, efficiency, and thermal dynamics, all without any formal scientific framework. The construction of permanent hearths represents one of the most significant advances in human fire technology. These carefully engineered structures, built from selected stones and designed clay surfaces, provided controlled environments for fire that enhanced both safety and efficiency. The hearthstones were chosen for their ability to absorb, retain, and radiate heat effectively. The layout was designed to optimize airflow, contain fire safely, and provide workspace for fire-related activities. Archaeological evidence from sites like Kesim Cave reveals hearths of stunning sophistication. These installations include features like draft channels for airflow control, ash removal systems for maintenance, and specialized areas for different types of fire activities. Some hearths show evidence of temperature zoning, where different areas were maintained at different heat levels for various purposes. Simultaneously, the development of fuel management systems transformed fire from a constant survival challenge into a reliable household utility. Master firekeepers developed techniques for fuel procurement, processing, storage, and quality control that ensured consistent fire performance. They learned to season wood for optimal burning characteristics, create fuel mixtures that burned at specific temperatures, and maintain fuel supplies that could sustain fires for extended periods. Different types of fuel were categorized and used for specific purposes. Fast-burning materials like dry grass and small twigs were used for fire starting and quick heating. Medium-burning materials like branches and splitwood provided sustained heat for cooking and warmth. Slow-burning materials like large logs and specially prepared fuel blocks were used for overnight fires and long-term heat applications. The creation of specialized fire tools marks this period as the beginning of true fire technology industrialization. Master firekeepers developed increasingly sophisticated implements for fire management, bellows made from animal skins for precise airflow control, tongs and manipulators for handling hot materials safely, and specialized containers for transporting fires and storing coals. Perhaps most remarkably, this period saw the development of fire-making techniques that achieved near-perfect reliability. Master firemakers could create flames quickly and consistently under virtually any conditions, using techniques that had been refined through generations of experimentation and improvement. The bow drill method, which uses a rapidly spinning wooden spindle to generate friction heat, likely reached its full development during this period. The social organization around advanced fire technology created humanity's first true technical specializations. Fire masters became recognized experts whose knowledge was essential for community survival and prosperity. These specialists developed the first formal apprenticeship systems, with younger individuals spending years learning the complex skills required for fire mastery. The transmission of fire knowledge became increasingly systematic and sophisticated. Master firekeepers developed teaching methods that could reliably transfer complex technical knowledge from one generation to the next. This included not just practical skills, but also the theoretical understanding necessary for innovation and problem-solving in fire management. Regional fire technologies began to diverge significantly as different populations optimized their techniques for local conditions and resources. Desert fire masters developed techniques for conserving fuel and managing fires in extreme heat. Arctic populations created methods for maintaining fires in sub-freezing conditions with limited fuel sources. Tropical firekeepers specialized in managing fires in high humidity environments. The development of portable fire technologies reached new levels of sophistication during this period. Master firekeepers created portable hearths that could be transported and assembled quickly, fire containers that could maintain coals for days of travel, and fire-making kits that included everything necessary for reliable fire creation under field conditions. The integration of fire technology with toolmaking created the first examples of what we might recognize as industrial processes. Fire masters learned to use controlled heat for tool manufacturing, developing techniques for heat-treating stone tools to improve their durability and sharpness. They created specialized forges for toolmaking that provided precise temperature control and optimal working conditions. Food processing techniques reached unprecedented levels of sophistication as master cooks developed methods that maximize nutritional extraction while minimizing fuel consumption. They created cooking methods that could process foods optimally for different purposes, maximizing protein availability, enhancing vitamin absorption, or creating foods that could be stored for extended periods. The development of fire-based preservation techniques enable communities to maintain food supplies through seasonal variations and resource scarcity. Master food processors learned to use controlled heat, smoke, and dehydration to create preserved foods that could sustain communities during difficult periods while maintaining nutritional value. The creation of fire-based manufacturing techniques marked the beginning of human industrial technology. Fire masters developed methods for creating materials that didn't exist in nature: hardened clay ceramics, refined adhesives, and processed organic materials with enhanced properties. These manufactured materials enabled the creation of more sophisticated tools and technologies. The psychological and social effects of fire mastery were profound. Communities with master firekeepers gained enormous confidence in their ability to control their environment and survive challenging conditions. This sense of technological mastery influenced their approach to other challenges, encouraging greater innovation and experimentation in non-fire technologies. The economic implications of advanced fire technology created the first examples of human technological advantage as a survival strategy. Communities with superior fire masters could extract more resources from the same environment, survive in more challenging conditions, and support larger populations than communities with less advanced fire technology. Trade relationships developed around fire technology as communities specialized in different aspects of fire mastery. Some groups became known for producing superior fire-making tools, others for creating high-quality fuel preparations, still others for developing innovative fire applications. These trade relationships created networks of technological exchange that accelerated innovation across multiple communities. The development of fire safety protocols became increasingly important as fire technologies became more powerful and complex. Master firekeepers developed systematic approaches to preventing accidental fires, managing fire emergencies, and containing fires that threatened to spread beyond control. These safety systems were among humanity's first formal risk management technologies. The standardization of fire techniques within communities created the foundation for what we might recognize as technological traditions. Master firekeepers established standards for hearth construction, fuel preparation, fire-making procedures, and safety protocols that could be transmitted consistently across generations and communities. The cognitive demands of fire mastery continued to drive human brain development in directions that would prove crucial for later technological advancement. Understanding complex fire systems required abstract reasoning, systematic thinking, and the ability to manage multiple variables, simultaneously cognitive skills that would become essential for all subsequent human technologies. Environmental Management through fire technology began during this period as master firekeepers learned to use controlled burning for landscape modification. They developed techniques for clearing areas for habitation, managing plant growth to enhance food production, and using fire to create favorable conditions for hunting and resource gathering. The development of fire-based communication systems reached new levels of sophistication as communities created standardized smoke signals, beacon networks, and fire displays that could transmit complex information across large distances. These communication systems were among humanity's first information technologies. The integration of fire technology with artistic expression may have begun during this period as master firekeepers learned to create controlled light effects, color variations in flames, and decorative fire displays. The relationship between fire and human aesthetic sense that would become so important in later cultural development likely has its roots in this period of fire mastery. Quality control in fire technology became increasingly important as communities relied more heavily on consistent fire performance for survival and prosperity. Master firekeepers developed testing methods for evaluating fuel quality, hearth performance, and fire-making tool effectiveness that ensured reliable fire technology performance. The documentation of fire knowledge through proto-symbolic systems may have begun during this period as master firekeepers developed methods for recording and transmitting complex technical information. While full symbolic communication was still in the future, the systematic organization of fire knowledge required information management techniques that would become foundations for later symbolic systems. The development of fire-based timekeeping systems enabled communities to coordinate activities and plan for future events with unprecedented precision. Master firekeepers learned to use controlled burning rates, fuel consumption patterns, and fire behavior to measure time intervals and schedule community activities. The creation of fire-based heating systems for shelters marked a significant advance in environmental control technology. Master firekeepers developed techniques for efficiently heating enclosed spaces, managing air circulation to prevent smoke accumulation, and maintaining comfortable temperatures with minimal fuel consumption. The integration of fire technology with water management created new possibilities for resource processing and environmental control. Master firekeepers developed methods for heating large quantities of water for cleaning, processing, and sterilization that enhanced health and expanded food processing capabilities. The establishment of fire maintenance schedules and protocols ensured that communities could rely on continuous fire availability without exhausting their firekeepers. Master firekeepers developed shift systems, backup procedures, and emergency protocols that made fire technology a reliable foundation for community life. As this chapter concludes, we see Homo erectus populations that have achieved complete technological mastery over fire in all its applications. They can create fire reliably under any conditions, manage fires for optimal performance in any application, and use fire technology to transform their environment in ways that enhance survival and prosperity. Chapter 10. The Cognitive Leap. The firelight flickers across thoughtful faces as our Homo erectus ancestors sit in contemplation around their evening hearth. But something extraordinary is happening in this scene that sets it apart from countless similar gatherings over the previous million years. The quality of attention, the depth of focus, the complexity of interaction, these are no longer the minds that first discovered fire. These are minds that fire has fundamentally transformed. The cognitive revolution enabled by mastery of fire represents one of the most dramatic transformations in the history of consciousness. The brains examining the flames this evening are nearly 40% larger than those of their fire-making ancestors. More importantly, they're organized differently, wired for types of thinking that would have been impossible before the fire-enabled explosion in human Cognitive capability. The relationship between fire use and brain development is more intimate than early researchers imagined. The enhanced nutrition provided by systematic cooking created the metabolic foundation for larger brains, but the cognitive demands of fire management shaped how those larger brains were organized and what they could accomplish. Consider the mental processes required for advanced fire management. A master firekeeper must simultaneously track multiple variables: fuel consumption rates, airflow patterns, temperature distributions, weather conditions, and safety considerations. They must plan fuel procurement hours or days in advance, predict fire behavior under changing conditions, and troubleshoot problems in real time using abstract reasoning about invisible processes. These cognitive demands were unlike anything that had existed in the natural world before humans began working with fire. Managing fire required the development of working memory systems that could track multiple changing variables simultaneously, planning capabilities that could project outcomes hours or days into the future, and abstract reasoning abilities that could understand invisible causal relationships. The social cognitive demands of fire management were equally transformative. Coordinating fire-related activities among multiple individuals required sophisticated communication about abstract concepts, temporal planning that aligned individual actions with group needs, and social reasoning about responsibility, expertise, and authority in technical matters. Perhaps most importantly, fire management required the development of metacognitive abilities, thinking about thinking itself. Master firekeepers had to understand not just how to manage fires, but how to learn fire management, how to teach it to others, and how to improve techniques through systematic experimentation and evaluation. The extended periods of artificial light provided by controlled fires had direct neurological effects that may have contributed to cognitive development. The ability to remain active and socially engaged after sunset extended the daily period for learning, social interaction, and mental stimulation. Brain development in young individuals benefited from these extended periods of cognitive activity. The social environment around fires created unprecedented opportunities for knowledge transmission and cultural development. The gathering place that fires provided allowed for sustained periods of communication, demonstration, and teaching that were impossible when groups were constantly mobile and focused on immediate survival needs. The development of complex tool-making techniques in fire-lit environments accelerated the evolution of fine motor control and hand-brain coordination. Working by firelight required precise manual skills and enhanced spatial reasoning that contributed to overall cognitive development. The integration of fire technology with tool-making created positive feedback loops that enhanced both technologies. Simultaneously, the cognitive security provided by environmental control enabled the development of higher-order thinking that would have been impossible under constant survival pressure. Individuals who could rely on fire for warmth, light, and food processing had mental resources available for creative thinking, experimentation, and innovation that individuals focused on immediate survival could not afford. The abstract reasoning required for understanding fire behavior provided crucial foundation for mathematical and scientific thinking. Concepts like proportionality, rate of change, optimization, and systems thinking, all essential for advanced human technologies, were first developed through fire management applications. The development of symbolic thinking may have been accelerated by fire management activities. The use of smoke signals, fire displays, and controlled light effects for communication created some of humanity's first symbolic systems where abstract meanings were associated with observable phenomena. The enhanced nutrition provided by fire-processed foods had direct effects on brain development that went beyond simply providing more calories. Cooking unlocked nutrients that were essential for brain development but unavailable from raw foods. including specific amino acids, vitamins, and minerals that supported neural growth and connectivity. The reliability of fire technology enabled the development of forward-planning capabilities that became characteristic of human cognition. Individuals who could count on consistent access to fire could make plans that extended further into the future, invest time and energy in activities with delayed payoffs, and develop strategies that required sustained effort over extended periods. The social stratification that developed around fire expertise created some of humanity's first intellectual hierarchies, based on technical knowledge rather than physical capability. This recognition of mental skills as valuable contributions to group survival may have accelerated the development of cognitive capabilities that enhanced learning and innovation. The problem-solving challenges of fire management required the development of systematic experimental approaches that became foundational for all subsequent human scientific thinking. Fire masters had to develop hypotheses about fire behavior, test these hypotheses through controlled experiments, and revise their understanding based on empirical results. The risk management requirements of fire technology accelerated the development of probabilistic thinking and uncertainty analysis. Fire masters had to assess risks, evaluate trade-offs, and make decisions under uncertainty. Cognitive skills that became essential for all human technological development. The coordination requirements of advanced fire technology drove the evolution of sophisticated social cognition, including theory of mind capabilities that allowed individuals to understand and predict the mental states of others. Effective fire management required understanding what others knew, what they were thinking, and how they were likely to behave. The teaching requirements of fire technology created pressure for the development of instructional abilities that went far beyond simple demonstration and imitation. Fire masters had to develop methods for explaining abstract concepts, breaking complex skills into learnable components, and adapting instruction to individual learning styles and capabilities. The standardization of fire techniques within communities required the development of categorical thinking and rule-based reasoning. Fire masters had to create mental categories for different types of fires, fuels, and techniques, and develop rule systems that could guide decision-making in various situations. The troubleshooting requirements of fire technology accelerated the development of diagnostic reasoning and systematic problem-solving approaches. When fires didn't behave as expected, fire masters had to identify possible causes, test potential solutions, and implement fixes. Cognitive processes that became essential for all technological development. The optimization challenges of fire management drove the development of efficiency thinking and resource management cognitive strategies. Fire masters had to maximize output while minimizing input, balance competing objectives, and find optimal solutions to complex trade-off problems. The innovation requirements of advancing fire technology created pressure for creative thinking, capabilities that could generate novel solutions to technical challenges. Fire masters who could invent new techniques, adapt existing methods to new situations, and combine different approaches in innovative ways had significant advantages. The memory requirements of complex fire management accelerated the development of sophisticated information storage and retrieval systems in human cognition. Fire masters had to remember vast amounts of technical information, organize this information for efficient access, and update their knowledge base as techniques improved. The timing requirements of fire management drove the development of temporal reasoning abilities that became characteristic of human cognition. Fire masters had to understand duration, sequence, synchronization, and scheduling in ways that other activities didn't require. The quality control requirements of reliable fire technology created pressure for the development of evaluation and assessment cognitive capabilities. Fire masters had to develop standards for judging performance, methods for detecting problems, and procedures for maintaining quality consistency. The communication requirements of fire technology drove the development of technical language capabilities that became foundational for all human knowledge transmission. Fire masters had to develop precise vocabulary for fire-related concepts, clear explanation strategies for complex procedures, and effective methods for resolving misunderstandings. The environmental reading requirements of fire management accelerated the development of pattern recognition and prediction capabilities. Fire masters had to read weather patterns, assess fuel conditions, and predict fire behavior based on environmental indicator skills that generalized to many other survival and technological applications. The safety requirements of fire technology created pressure for the development of hazard assessment and accident prevention cognitive strategies. Fire masters had to anticipate potential problems, implement preventive measures, and respond effectively to emergencies, capabilities that became essential for all subsequent human technologies. The multitasking requirements of advanced fire management drove the development of attention control and cognitive flexibility that became characteristic of human mental capabilities. Fire masters had to monitor multiple processes simultaneously, switch rapidly between different tasks, and maintain awareness of changing conditions while focused on specific activities. The apprenticeship systems that developed around fire technology created structured learning environments that accelerated cognitive development in young individuals. The combination of observation, practice, instruction, and feedback provided optimal conditions for skill acquisition and knowledge development that enhanced brain growth and organization. The competitive advantages gained through superior fire technology created selective pressure for individuals with enhanced cognitive capabilities. Groups with more intelligent fire masters survived better, reproduced more successfully, and passed on genes associated with enhanced cognitive abilities to their offspring. The cultural transmission of fire knowledge created cumulative learning, environments where each generation could build upon the achievements of previous generations. This cumulative cultural evolution accelerated cognitive development by providing increasingly complex intellectual challenges for developing minds. The technological complexity of advanced fire systems required the development of systems thinking, capabilities that could understand interactions between multiple components. Fire masters had to grasp how changes in one aspect of fire management affected aspects mental skills that became essential for all subsequent technological development. The resource management challenges of fire technology drove the development of economic thinking about costs, benefits, and optimization. Fire masters had to understand trade-offs between different choices, evaluate the efficiency of different approaches, and make resource allocation decisions that maximized overall benefits. The social coordination requirements of fire technology accelerated the development of leadership and organizational capabilities. Fire masters had to coordinate group activities, resolve conflicts, and make decisions that affected community welfare. Social cognitive skills that became foundational for all subsequent human social organization. The innovation and experimentation encouraged by fire technology created intellectual environments that rewarded curiosity, creativity, and systematic investigation. Individuals who could develop new techniques, solve novel problems, and improve existing methods gained status and reproductive advantages that selected for enhanced cognitive capabilities. As this chapter concludes, we see the emergence of minds that are recognizably modern in their cognitive capabilities. The fire-enabled expansion of human brain size and organization has created individuals capable of abstract reasoning, systematic experimentation, complex social coordination, and innovative problem-solving that will prove essential for all subsequent human technological and cultural development. The stage is now set for the final chapter of our story, Understanding how the mastery of fire by Homo erectus created the foundation for everything that followed in human development, from art and language to agriculture and civilization. As we reach the end of our incredible journey through deep time, take a moment to consider the scope of what we've witnessed. We began with early humans who fled from fire and terror, and we've ended with populations who had achieved such complete mastery over flame that every subsequent human culture would be built on their achievements. The story of how Homo erectus discovered fire is really the story of how humanity discovered itself. The accidental spark struck between stones became the foundation for abstract thinking. The first wrapped ember became the beginning of technology. The initial fire foraging expeditions became the template for scientific exploration. The early cooking experiments became the nutritional foundation for our large brains. But perhaps most remarkably, we've seen how a single technological breakthrough, the control of fire, created cascading changes that transformed every aspect of human existence. Fire didn't just provide warmth and light. It enabled larger brains, more complex societies, enhanced communication, and the cognitive foundations for every subsequent human achievement. The implications for our modern world are profound. We live surrounded by technologies that trace their origins back to those first controlled flames. The engines that power our transportation, the power plants that light our cities, the stoves that cook our food, even the computers that process our information. All of these are ultimately descendants of that first moment when a Homo erectus firekeeper looked at a spark and saw possibility rather than danger. Understanding this deep history also reminds us of something crucial about human nature. We are, fundamentally, a species defined by our relationship with technology. The sophisticated tools we use today aren't departures from our natural state. They're the latest chapter in a story that began nearly 2 million years ago with the mastery of fire. The progression from fire foragers to fire makers to fire masters reveals the essential human capacity for cumulative innovation. Each generation built upon the achievements of their predecessors, refining techniques, solving new problems, and pushing the boundaries of what was possible. This same pattern of cumulative technological development continues today as we build upon centuries of scientific and technological advancement. The social implications of fire mastery are equally relevant to our modern world. The cooperation required for fire management, the specialization of firekeeping roles, and the knowledge transmission systems developed around fire use establish patterns of human social organization that continue to shape our societies today. From universities to corporations to research institutions, we still organize ourselves around the principles first developed by fire-using communities. The cognitive transformations enabled by fire use offer insights into the nature of human intelligence itself. The abstract reasoning, systematic experimentation, and long-term planning required for fire management developed mental capabilities that distinguish humans from all other species. Understanding how these cognitive abilities emerged through technological engagement helps us appreciate the deep connection between human thinking and tool use. The environmental management practices developed by fire-using populations offer lessons for our current environmental challenges. Early fire masters learned to use their powerful technology sustainably, developing practices that enhanced rather than destroyed the ecosystems they depended upon. Their understanding of the need to balance resource use with resource regeneration provides wisdom that remains relevant for modern environmental stewardship. As we face modern challenges, climate change, environmental degradation, resource management, we can draw inspiration from our fire-mastering ancestors. They faced seemingly impossible challenges and overcame them through intelligence, cooperation, and the willingness to see opportunity where others saw only danger. They transformed a force of destruction into a tool of creation, a source of terror into a foundation for civilization. The legacy of those first fire makers lives on in every human achievement, every technological breakthrough, and every moment when we choose to illuminate darkness rather than flee from it. Their courage in approaching the flames, their persistence in learning fire's language, and their wisdom in sharing that knowledge across generations created the foundation for everything we are today. The fire they discovered still burns in every human heart, driving us to explore, to innovate, and to transform challenges into opportunities. From the first spark to the stars themselves, we remain the species that carries fire wherever we go. In every laboratory, where scientists push the boundaries of knowledge, in every workshop where inventors create new technologies, in every classroom where teachers kindle the flame of understanding in young minds, the fire of Homo erectus burns on. The mastery of fire was humanity's first great technological revolution, but it was far from our last. The same cognitive capabilities, social structures, and innovative spirit that enabled our ancestors to tame the flames continue to drive human progress today. As we stand on the threshold of new technological frontiers, artificial intelligence, space exploration, genetic engineering, we carry with us the wisdom and capabilities first developed around the hearths of our ancient ancestors. The fire, that began as a mysterious and terrifying natural force, became humanity's most faithful companion, accompanying us on every journey, enabling every achievement, and lighting the way to our future among the stars.